the quiet source of inner disturbance. Hold this point steady as we begin. What unsettles you does not arrive fully formed from the outside. Events enter your life without instruction, without meaning, without command. They simply occur. The disturbance you experience is not carried by the event itself, but added afterward, through judgment. This is not a comforting idea, and it is not meant to be. It removes the possibility of blaming circumstances, other people, or fate for your inner state. When something unexpected happens, the mind moves quickly. It labels. It evaluates. It declares something good or bad, acceptable or intolerable. This declaration feels immediate, as if it were part of the event. But it is not. It is in addition. The moment you forget this, peace becomes dependent on conditions you do not control. Stoic discipline begins here, with a refusal to confuse events with judgments. The world does not owe you calm. Other people do not owe you understanding. Outcomes do not owe you fairness. Responsibility cannot be outsourced to circumstances without cost. The cost is inner freedom. This is not an argument for emotional suppression, nor a denial that impressions arise. Feelings will appear. Reactions will suggest themselves. What matters is not their arrival, but your agreement with the story they propose. Peace and conflict are decided at that point, not before. This distinction places the burden where it belongs, on your faculty of judgment. That burden is not light, but it is precise. And precision is the beginning of discipline. Notice this carefully. The boundary where responsibility begins. Everything that follows depends on one clear distinction. There is a line that runs through every moment of your life. On one side of it are things that belong to you. On the other side are things that never will. Confusion about this line is the primary source of wasted effort, frustration, and inner conflict. Stoic discipline begins by drawing it clearly and refusing to blur it for comfort. What belongs to you is narrow, but decisive. Your judgments, your intentions, your choices, your willingness or refusal to assent to what appears in your mind. These are not shared possessions. No one can think on your behalf. No event can force agreement from you. Even when pressure is intense, the faculty that says yes or no remains yours. What does not belong to you is far more expansive. Events unfold without consulting your preferences. Other people act from their own judgments, not yours. Outcomes emerge from countless causes beyond your reach. Reputation, approval, timing, health, and chance move according to forces that do not answer to your plans. Treating these as if they were yours to command is an error, not a moral failing. But it is an error with consequences. When you expect control where none exists, frustration is guaranteed. Effort is poured into managing impressions, people, and results instead of tending to judgment. The mind becomes reactive because it is attempting an impossible task. This is why discipline feels exhausting to many. They are practicing it in the wrong domain. Consider a simple example. You send a message and receive no reply. The silence itself is neutral. It contains no accusation, no rejection, no meaning. Yet almost immediately, the mind supplies a verdict. Disrespect. Disinterest. Failure. None of these are facts. They are judgments added after the event. The discomfort that follows is not caused by the unanswered message, but by treating that judgment as if it were imposed from outside. Or consider criticism. Words are spoken. Sound reaches the ear. That is all that happens at first. The disturbance begins when the mind concludes, I have been diminished, or this should not have happened. The behavior of another person does not cross the boundary into your inner life on its own. It must be admitted through agreement. This boundary is not about withdrawal from life or indifference to action. You still plan, speak, work, and respond. But you do so with clarity about what effort can influence and what it cannot. You take responsibility for your judgments precisely so you can stop pretending responsibility extends beyond them. Many people resist this distinction because it feels like loss. They believe giving up control over outcomes means surrender. In reality, it is the opposite. By returning authority to judgment, you recover the only form of control that cannot be taken, delayed, or denied. You stop negotiating with chance and begin governing what is already yours. This is also where blame loses its appeal. If disturbance comes from judgment, then accusing circumstances becomes unnecessary. This does not mean approving of everything that happens. It means refusing to assign your inner state to external causes. The cost of that refusal is vigilance. The benefit is coherence. The boundary does not remove difficulty from life. It removes confusion from effort. When you know where responsibility begins and ends, you stop scattering attention. Discipline becomes possible because it is directed. This explains where effort is misplaced, but not yet how disturbance takes hold. The moment agreement is given. Now we look at what actually creates disturbance. An impression arrives before you have time to prepare. A sound, a delay, a facial expression, a message, a memory. This arrival is automatic. You do not summon it, and you cannot prevent it. The Stoics never claimed otherwise. The mistake is assuming that because an impression appears, agreement has already been given. It has not. Between the arrival of an impression and the reaction that follows, there is a moment. This moment is brief, often overlooked, but decisive. It is the point at which the mind either withholds judgment or consents to the story the impression suggests. Peace or conflict is determined here, not later. Impressions speak in a persuasive voice. They say, "This is bad. This is unfair. This means something about you." They do not ask permission. They present themselves as facts. But they are not facts. They are proposals. Assent is the act of accepting the proposal as true. This is where freedom resides. Not in controlling what appears, but in choosing whether to agree. Consider criticism again. The words reach your ears. An impression forms, "I am being attacked." At this stage, nothing has gone wrong. The impression is merely data combined with habit. Disturbance begins only when the mind adds, "This should not be happening," or "I am diminished by this." The feeling that follows seems immediate, but it is downstream from agreement. Or consider delay. You expect progress. Instead, there is waiting. The impression says, "This is a problem." If you assent, irritation follows. If you withhold assent, the delay remains, but the disturbance does not. The external condition is identical. The inner outcome is not. This distinction between feeling and agreement is essential. A sensation may arise in the body. Tightness, heat, acceleration. These are not judgments. They are physical responses. The mind often rushes to justify them with a verdict. "I am angry because I was wronged." But the anger does not require that explanation to exist. The explanation is added after the fact. Stoic discipline does not aim to eliminate impressions or sensations. That would be impossible. It aims to train the pause before assent. This pause may be brief. Sometimes it is nothing more than a single breath. But even the smallest pause reasserts authority. Most people miss this moment because they believe reactions are forced. They say, "I couldn't help it," meaning the reaction felt automatic. But automatic does not mean compulsory. It means practiced. The mind has been trained, often unintentionally, to assent quickly and without examination. Assent is not a dramatic declaration. It is often silent. It appears as certainty. "Of course this is bad. Anyone would be upset." These phrases signal that judgment has already been granted the status of fact. Once that happens, the mind shifts into defense, justification, or resentment. Conflict follows naturally, because the verdict has framed the situation as an injury. The Stoic response is not to argue with impressions in the heat of the moment. It is to delay agreement. To say, Internally, this is an impression, not yet a conclusion. This does not solve the situation. It reclaims jurisdiction. At first, this practice feels unnatural. The mind is accustomed to speed. It prefers immediate interpretation. Slowing it down can feel like hesitation or weakness. In reality, it is precision. You are separating what appears from what you accept. Over time, this distinction becomes clearer. You begin to notice impressions as impressions. You recognize the moment when agreement is about to be given. This recognition is not theoretical. It is felt. And once it is felt, it cannot be unseen. Understanding the mechanism is not enough. It must be trained. Discipline as the training of attention. This is where most people misunderstand discipline. Discipline is commonly imagined as force applied against oneself. Endurance. Suppression. A tightening of the will. This misunderstanding causes people to exhaust themselves while making little progress. Stoic discipline is something quieter and more exact. It is the training of attention, not the punishment of impulse. What requires training is not emotion, but judgment. Impressions arise on their own. Sensations appear without consent. Trying to eliminate these is futile. What can be trained is the habit of noticing what the mind is doing with them. Discipline is the repeated practice of returning attention to the moment before assent. This is why willpower alone fails. Willpower is deployed after judgment has already been accepted. By the time you are forcing yourself to behave differently, the verdict has already shaped the inner landscape. You are managing consequences instead of preventing error. Training moves earlier in the sequence. Consider how habits form. The mind repeats what it practices. If it repeatedly assents quickly, certainty becomes reflexive. If it practices pause, pause becomes available under pressure. Discipline, in this sense, is not heroic. It is incremental. It is built in moments that feel insignificant. This reframes effort. You are not trying to overpower anger, fear, or frustration. You are training yourself to notice when an impression is asking for agreement. At first, this noticing happens after the fact. You recognize the judgment once disturbance has already begun. That recognition is not failure. It is the beginning of practice. Over time, the interval shortens. You catch the judgment forming. Eventually, you notice the invitation before agreement is given. This progression cannot be rushed. It follows the logic of training, not insight. Understanding the theory once does not replace repetition. It is important to be precise here. Stoic discipline does not aim at emotional numbness. Emotions will still arise. The difference is that they are no longer mistaken for commands. An emotion is information, not instruction. When judgment is trained, emotion loses its authority without being denied. Many people abandon this practice because they expect immediate calm. When calm does not appear, they conclude the method has failed. This expectation is itself an unexamined judgment. Discipline does not promise comfort. It promises clarity. Calm may follow, but it is not the target. Training also requires choosing manageable conditions. You do not begin by testing yourself in extremes. You train attention in ordinary moments. Minor delays. Small frustrations. Casual remarks. These are sufficient. If attention cannot be maintained here, it will not appear under greater strain. This is why Stoic practice emphasizes preparation before pressure. You rehearse distinctions when nothing is at stake. You remind yourself that impressions are not verdicts. You review past reactions without blame. This builds familiarity. When difficulty arrives, the mind recognizes the terrain. Another common error is turning discipline into self-judgment. When a reaction slips through, the mind declares failure. This adds a second, unnecessary judgment. The practice is not to condemn yourself for assenting, but to observe that assent occurred. Observation restores accuracy. Accuracy restores choice. Discipline, properly understood, is gentle without being permissive. It does not excuse error, but it does not dramatize it either. Each moment becomes a chance to practice returning attention to what is yours, the capacity to withhold or grant agreement. Nothing dramatic marks progress. There is no clear finish line. What changes is reliability. The pause becomes more available. Judgment becomes less hurried. Inner life becomes less reactive without becoming passive. Training remains abstract unless it appears in daily life. Ordinary moments as the measure of practice. This practice is proven in what seems insignificant. Stoic discipline does not announce itself in dramatic tests. It reveals itself in how you handle what you normally dismiss as minor. The tone of a message, a missed expectation, an interruption. These moments arrive daily, without preparation, and they are sufficient. If judgment can be governed here, it can be governed anywhere. The first practice is anticipation, properly understood. This does not mean rehearsing misfortune with anxiety. It means acknowledging, in advance, that impressions will arise. Delays will occur. People will act according to their own judgments. By expecting this accurately, you reduce surprise. Surprise is not the cause of disturbance, but it amplifies it by inviting hurried assent. When you begin the day, you do not need elaborate reflection. A simple reminder is enough: today will include inconvenience. This statement is not pessimistic. It is descriptive. When inconvenience appears, it then registers as familiar rather than offensive. The mind is less tempted to declare, "This should not be happening." The second practice is the pause before assent. This is the central operation. When an impression appears, you do not need to analyze it fully. You only need to delay agreement. One breath is enough. The breath is not a relaxation technique. It is a marker. It marks the space where judgment can be examined. In that space, you do not argue with the impression. You simply note it. This is an impression. This short statement interrupts the automatic movement toward verdict. Sometimes the disturbance will continue anyway. That does not invalidate the pause. The pause preserves jurisdiction, even when emotion remains. The third practice is review, conducted without praise or guilt. At the end of the day, you look back briefly. Where did assent occur too quickly? Where was a pause available? This review is not a trial. It is an inventory. Guilt is itself an unexamined judgment, adding another layer of disturbance where none is needed. If you find yourself replaying moments with self-criticism, return to accuracy. A judgment was given. That is all. From that observation, practice becomes possible. From condemnation, it does not. These practices are simple, but simplicity should not be confused with ease. The mind resists repetition. It prefers novelty and explanation. Yet progress here comes from returning to the same points again and again. Anticipate impressions. Pause before assent. Review without distortion. Nothing more is required. It is important to see that this practice does not remove difficulty from your days. Tasks remain demanding. People remain unpredictable. Outcomes remain uncertain. What changes is not the content of life, but your relationship to it. You stop escalating ordinary events into inner conflicts. Many people abandon this approach because they look for visible transformation. They want fewer impressions, fewer emotions, fewer reactions. Stoic discipline does not promise this. It promises reliability. You become more consistent in where you place responsibility. That consistency produces steadiness, not through control of events, but through governance of judgment. Another subtle shift occurs. You begin to recognize when disturbance is optional. This recognition does not prevent every reaction, but it changes how you interpret them. A reaction becomes information about training, not a verdict on character. Practice also clarifies effort. You stop investing energy in rehearsing arguments, defending positions, or resenting outcomes. That energy is redirected toward attention. Attention is quieter, but more effective. It works upstream, before conflict takes shape. Ordinary moments are sufficient because they are frequent. Each one is a repetition. Each repetition strengthens familiarity with the pause. Over time, the pause feels less like interruption and more like default. This is not achieved by force. It is achieved by returning, again and again, to what is yours. When this practice becomes stable, a different kind of freedom appears. Freedom that does not depend on circumstance. Freedom is often misunderstood. Many people imagine freedom as relief from difficulty. Fewer obstacles. Better conditions. More agreeable outcomes. By this definition, freedom is fragile. It depends on factors that shift without notice. Stoic discipline proposes a different meaning, one that does not rise or fall with circumstance. Freedom, in this sense, is the stability of your governing faculty. It is the condition in which judgment remains under your command, regardless of what occurs. Life does not become easier under this form of freedom. Events do not become kinder. What changes is where authority is located. When judgment is trained, external pressure loses its ability to compel inner surrender. You may still prefer certain outcomes. You may still work toward them. But your inner state is no longer negotiated through success or failure. Approval does not grant peace. Disapproval does not remove it. The world continues to act. You continue to choose. This distinction matters because comfort and freedom are often confused. Comfort seeks ease. It avoids friction. It depends on predictability. Freedom tolerates discomfort without losing coherence. It allows effort without attachment to result. Comfort can be taken suddenly. Freedom must be relinquished internally. This is why Stoic freedom is maintained, not achieved. There is no final state where judgment no longer requires attention. Impressions will continue to arrive. Old habits will resurface. The work does not end. It stabilizes. Maintenance replaces struggle. When this is understood, disappointment loses its sting. A reaction does not signal collapse. It signals a moment of inattentiveness. That moment can be corrected without drama. Authority is simply returned inward. Nothing else is required. This form of freedom does not announce itself. Others may not notice it at all. That is part of its strength. It is not performative. It does not rely on recognition. It is confirmed privately, in moments when disturbance could have been justified but was not indulged. Importantly, this does not mean disengagement from life. You still act. You still care. You still pursue what seems reasonable. The difference is that action is no longer fused with identity. Outcomes inform judgment, but they do not dictate worth. This also changes how loss is experienced. Loss still hurts. Stoic discipline does not deny that. But loss does not dismantle inner order unless judgment agrees that it must. Grief can be present without collapse. Effort can continue without resentment. Freedom here is quiet. It does not remove pain. It prevents pain from becoming disorder. It does not guarantee calm. It preserves clarity. Nothing outside you must change for this to begin. This brings us to the final responsibility. The work that cannot be delegated. Nothing here requires escalation. What you have examined returns to a single responsibility. Disturbance does not belong to events. It does not belong to other people. It does not belong to outcomes, timing, or fortune. It belongs to judgment. And because it belongs to judgment, it belongs to you. This is not a comforting conclusion. It removes excuses. It removes the hope that circumstances will someday align and grant peace. But it also removes dependence. If peace depended on conditions, it would always be fragile. Because it depends on judgment, it is always available. You will not perform this practice perfectly. No one does. Impressions will still arrive with force. Old habits of assent will still assert themselves. Moments of reactivity will still occur. None of this invalidates the discipline. What matters is not perfection, but return. Each time you notice that judgment has run ahead of you, you are given the same opportunity again. You can reclaim authority without drama. You do not need to justify the reaction. You do not need to condemn yourself for it. You only need to recognize where responsibility lies and bring it back. This is why the work cannot be delegated. No one can pause on your behalf. No one can withhold assent for you. Guidance can clarify the mechanism. Practice must be personal. Inner freedom is not granted. It is maintained. Life will continue to present difficulty. Some of it will be sharp. Some of it will be unfair. Stoic discipline does not promise insulation from this. It promises that difficulty does not have to become inner disorder. That promise is kept each time judgment is examined before it is obeyed. The work is simple. It is not easy. And it is yours. Return to what is yours.